Hello, welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and I have a special friend with us today, Monique Williams. She is going to be talking about her experience coming up out of a life where everything was constant financial emergency to a life where she's got some control and she knows who her source is and she has begun to really dream. So I know that some of you out there can't even fathom what that's like. And some of you are in it right now. And I want to bring all of you together because that's how Monique got where she is today. People coming together to pour into one another's lives and make a difference. And you know, I am all about making a difference in your world. I'm Christy Bridges from One Moment Wiser, and I teach Christians to become authors because God speaks to different people through our unique voices, just like Monique here. Monique, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for
I'm
having me.
so glad you're here. So you have a unique voice. You have a unique story. And I would love to be in a moment with you. If you could take us to where you were before you started this transformation. Can you do that?
Yes, I definitely can. Back in 2014, I became the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I got a degree in graphic design. I thought I knew where my path was. I loved art and computers, and I felt that was the road I was going down, but found it very hard to find a job. And at the time, I was living in low income housing. So I joined this group called Circles of Kettering. So Circles is a national group, but I was in the Circles of Kettering area. And I was partnered with a mentor. And it was me and my son, because I'm a single parent. And we're partnered with a mentor. And this mentor, Stacy Mitchell, she's been with me for years, been a great friend of mine. She was just one of a bunch of people that walk with me down this path to finding out, why am I in a situation of poverty, and how without friends, without support, without God's love, the struggle was going to continue to be hard. So I love the group. I learned a lot. And where it's brought me to now is a place of fully understanding poverty, the road that I've walked down, the road that many people have walked down, the not having enough and always wanting more. And I think it first started with getting my education and feeling some kind of pride about myself. And then the second part was joining a group of people that actually walked alongside of me, supported me, and wanted to help me on my journey to get out of poverty.
So you were a mother and living in subsidized housing.
Yes.
But you had a degree. It just wasn't a degree that got you jobs.
No.
So, sometimes people are in poverty situations because they, just kind of grew up thinking that was all there was to life, or because they just aren't real motivated. But you went through college. You made it the first person in your family to do that. Was it a little disappointing when you had worked so hard and then you found yourself stuck in there?
Yes, it's extremely disappointing. And I like to, when I talk about poverty, I think about people that live in poverty like crabs in a barrel. They're literally climbing over each other to try to get out of that situation, but they're stepping on others to get out of that barrel. And it's not a situation where I felt supported, especially living in low income housing. I felt like the people around me weren't necessarily trying to support me or boost me up. It was all like, let's stay down together, which is it's a negative kind of attitude to have. We should all be more uplifting. But I noticed that when I did get that degree and I was trying to better myself, I didn't have too many people that was trying to come up with me and support me. So I think that's one thing that I did feel was that the better I was trying to do for myself, the more friends I lost, let's be honest. That was very unfortunate. But then I realized you can't take everyone with you when you're trying to be successful. But I did find it so disconcerting. How can I have this degree, the thing that the American dream, we're supposed to try to accomplish this to better ourselves. I'm sitting here with a paper that says I'm qualified with this skill and no one will give me a chance. So that was very discouraging.
Boy, that's a lot right there. You've got, the death of the American dream, right? You work so hard to achieve it and it's not helping. But then you also have, loss of the people around you. And when you are focused on something, when you've got a goal and you're working, you have to put so much of yourself into it that you can't live two lives, right? You have to make those priority shifts that say, I'm going to do this, even if I don't get to hang out with everybody all the time. But it also puts this kind of unspoken distance where people think, did anybody ever give you the feeling like you thought they were better than them, or, you were confronting their idea of just the way things are?
I think, and I understand it now that I've matured a little bit more, that when you looking at someone that's more successful than you, but in the same situation, it's kind of some people look at it as a negative reflection on themselves. And my success should never be a negative reflection on another person, another woman, or another woman of color. We all should be trying to come up together and help and support each other. And that's one thing that I do want to do is give back to my community any way I can to try to help people realize what God has put in place for me may be different than what God has put in place for you. So we all got to walk a different path.
Say that again.
What God has put in place for me may be different than what God has put in place for you.
Everybody just stop for a second and take the freedom of that statement in. I'll just use the weight example because this is a really common thing for women. When women get together and there's a beautiful thin woman in the room, other women often don't focus on each other, but instead turn their focus to themselves and become insecure and make excuses and talk about all of a sudden, all this negative self-talk starts to become the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's unattractive. It brings you down and others down. And it's not why God put you in the room. God put you in the room to enjoy one another and to give into one another's lives.
Yes.
And sorry, I have a baby kitten that is just
horrible.
Anyway, but that is just so powerful when we realize where God has you and where you've gotten yourself, right? That's not necessarily where God has somebody else. Yes. What your struggles aren't necessarily somebody else's. What your level isn't necessarily the level somebody else is on.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't need an excuse. There's no call for apologies or competition in those cases. We can simply accept the freedom that God has put us, gotten us to where we are, right? He's gotten us this far and he wants to get us a lot further. We're eternal.
Yes.
But, we are where we are right now, and he's put us in a room with other people to be curious about those other people, communicate with those other people, be friendly and kind. And that just changes the whole dynamic of a room when people begin to behave that way. Since you have gone through, and in a minute, I want to go back and talk about circles. but you went through circles where you literally were around other people who maybe had gone through what you'd gone through already, and they were in a different place.
Yes.
And you got used to just communicating with that, different type of person. Has it made it easier for you not to get all self-negative when you're in a room now? You can just be you? Or did you ever have that problem? You seem so confident. You may never have dealt with that.
I seem confident now, and there was a time when I wasn't, because I let that title of being in poverty weigh down on me. There is a lot of shame attached to being in poverty. There's also a lot of, does God really love me, being attached to poverty? And I question that a lot. To me, God's reflection of love was the haves, not the have-nots. And I had to start thinking a little differently. And so my confidence did boost once I realized that God loves me for exactly who I am. And he sees my flaws, and he sees things that I can work on. And he's going to put things in my path to work on myself. By working on myself, I've been able to help other people to work on themselves. But I had to get it together first. So my confidence boost, this is brand new. This is because of circles. This is all because I've had people come alongside me to walk down this path to show me there's no shame attached to being in poverty. This is your situation. You're a product of generational poverty, and this is where you are. But can you build yourself out of this? Sure, by getting educated, by surrounding myself with different people, and trying to break out of that stereotype of the single Black woman that is typically angry all the time and wants to stay on welfare and doesn't want to better herself. That was never my story. My story was, I didn't have the means and the tools and the people around me to support me, to help me to get out of the situation that I was in.
That is so. Everything you say, I feel like I just want to take a moment and unpack. You say two sentences and it's full of impact. So you do have the confidence now.
Yes.
There is shame attached to poverty, and it doesn't. When you're struggling, you get tired of having to ask for help.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a lot for most people to even ask for help the first time.
Yeah.
And then when you have to ask for help again and again, it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into a place where everybody's talking about their Christmas shopping, or in situations that you're not even close to,
Oh, yes.
you feel like such an outsider, and you feel like everybody knows.
Mm-hmm. And
When
you're put in
you
those situations too,
Yeah.
when you have to go and apply for assistance every year, when you have to go down and stand these lines every Christmas so that your kid could have a toy. I was that person out there in the cold waiting for turkeys and toys every year for my kid. I was that person waiting in long lines at Community Action Partnership out there in the wintertime so that my lights didn't get cut off. I was that person that had to recertify every year for food stamps and medical coverage. And every time I had to, it took a piece of me. It is very hard to have to ask for help. And I don't understand why people think that people want to stay on the welfare system and keep getting this kind of services from the government. The government has a certain amount of control over you when they have to provide those services. You have to practically slice open your wrist and give blood. I mean, you have to give yourself over to a certain amount of control before you can get assistance. So that is not nothing that ever made me feel good as a parent and as a person.
Yeah. And that assistance isn't, one of the things that the middle class type people tend to believe. I personally really believed this until a few years ago, probably over the last decade, when I've gotten really in the trenches with different people who've had to live this way, I used to think there's a program for that, right? The government will provide, like the government's God, right? I used to think, oh well, there's housing and there's food stamps, and you're just not applying at the right programs. Well, I honestly, um, there are programs. They are, and I know that our government does the best that it can do, but our government is not God. God can take a tithe and multiply it and give back to the tither 100-fold, right? God has that kind of mathematical ability. He created the world and things are still being born. We expect the government to be that kind of capable. And they're just not.
No.
And so when you are scraping by and, maybe you have a part-time job, maybe you have some kind of work, but then, or you have no transportation, and then all of a sudden you have to spend all day at the office trying to get food stamps, and they don't come for another month, or they surprisingly disappear. That's a situation that not just you, but a whole lot of people have found themselves in. If there was one thing that you thought when you were going through that, if there was one thing that you thought, boy, there's lots of this, or, there's plenty of that, I'll never run out of that. What was it? Because in Tulsa, it's like food banks are on every corner.
Right.
But what about where you are?
Where I live at, I'm in the suburbs of Dayton, so food is a little easier to come by out here. But I know that there is a food desert in Dayton, and that's ridiculous for people to have to travel miles to find a decent place to get food for themselves and their children is ridiculous. And I think this is what recently is leading me down the entrepreneurship of trying to get a food truck started and to try to provide healthy foods to people that live in Dayton areas or any food desert areas. I want to help my community out, and this is ridiculous. But that's not something that I found where I live at that I was struggling with. I was more struggling with the support and feeling a little isolated, like, okay, just my community, just this one low income apartment complex in the suburbs where we're those people over there. Those people? Like, my kid attends the same school your kid attends, but we're looked at as those people. Like, why shun us out? Because right now, financially, I don't have a 2-parent household and I don't make as much as you make to be able to afford to live in the house across the street. But because I live in a community where people don't make a lot of money, I'm those other people. So I think that's the part that I really miss, is that community coming around and saying, we got you, all of you, and we're support of you living here.
So you had plenty of food.
Yes.
Well, food banks, but not community. You were isolated in the project, the apartment complex, or, the housing that everybody just kind of drew a circle around. Now, when you went to Circles, how did you discover Circles?
I believe when I discovered Circles, I know, it was Red's rookie camp. That was the camp that was coming to the low-income housing, and they were doing free camps for kids that parents couldn't afford to send them to any kind of summer camps for the month of June and July, I believe. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I have never been able to afford to send my son to camp. I've always wanted to. And he got to go. And I said, you know what? I'm going to volunteer to be a coach, because they were looking for volunteer coaches. I have never volunteered before in my life. So believe me, Red's Rookies baseball camp opened my eyes to volunteering, being a coach, teaching kids how to play a sport I've never played in my life. So it was a learning experience for everybody. But you know what? I absolutely loved it. I believe at the time I wasn't working, so I had that summer. I said, what else am I going to do? If I'm sending him to camp, let me go ahead and go. So that's what it was. Red Rookies Camp. There was another volunteer on the bus, and she said, hey, I know you live over here where I live. You're most likely struggling. Let me tell you about Circles. So that's how I got started with Circles. It was just word of mouth and someone, trying to look out for another mom.
Okay, let me ask you. You said, hey, I'm going to volunteer for this, but you didn't even know how to play baseball?
No, I am very sports challenged. I am, we didn't get outside much when I was a kid. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and we had one park down the street. Yeah, we concrete jungle. That's where I'm from. So hardly any grass around. Very not sports savvy. I had no idea what I was doing, but I tell you what, I got out there with those kids, and it was so fun and rewarding to see kids from my neighborhood that didn't have the funds to go to regular camp enjoying themselves for probably the first time in their lives.
That is wonderful. Was there any part of you that hesitated, that was like, oh, I don't have the time to volunteer. Oh, I don't have the skills, or what am I doing here? Was there any part of you that did that, or was it just cool because these were kids you knew?
I was bored and broke. That's the first thing.
There you go.
The second thing was I was a very clingy parent and didn't want to let my kid out of my sight. And the third thing I thought was, wow, the opportunity to go myself to a camp and to see what other kids, what kind of things they're doing in their childhood and things that I missed out on. It just seemed like it would be rewarding all around. But the first thing was I was pretty much like, well, what else am I going to do? And so if that's the way it got me to volunteering, and now my whole life, I just want to spend the last of my days volunteering forever, that's the spark that ignited this candle.
I love that you went for it and you actually got to experience camp along with the kids. I didn't get to go to camp either. I think maybe once my entire growing up years, if then, I don't know. So that just sounds like so much fun. But I was the kid who would trade places to be last in line so that I didn't have to swing the bat, because I was always afraid I'd embarrass myself. And now that I'm grown, I'm like, I'll embarrass myself. Hand me a bat.
Right. Let's go for it. Who's gonna say something? We're adults,
Exactly. So you ended up finding out about Circles from someone who actually lived near you.
Yes.
And what was it like when you, now the people who are listening, most of the people here don't even know what Circles is. I share about Circles all the time on LinkedIn, and I did a blog series because Stacy told me about it. It's been a while. So for people who don't know what it's like, can you just describe what that felt like, what a Circles meeting looks like, what it's like to be you at a Circles meeting?
So at the time, we were meeting once a week, and this is literally a group of strangers. I mean, I didn't know anyone there, and they had us separated as circle leaders and mentors, basically. So you kind of get partnered with a mentor, someone that's going to help you through your path of trying to get out of and learn more about poverty. And so I'm just thinking, okay, this is just something to do on a Tuesday. I wasn't really thinking I would get that much from it, to be honest. It was more like, well, what else are you going to do? You're just sitting around. And I'm the kind of person that I just take chances. I just kind of throw myself out there, and I'm kind of a yes woman a lot of times, but it's got me into some really good situations. So it's basically a group of people that come together once a week that are here to support and get behind what goals you have as a person that's trying to come up out of poverty. So just that partnership, with being partnered with someone that has a different background as you, that was the target that really was like, oh, that's interesting. So this person that is financially stable, have their own business, 2-parent household, white. Yeah, this person, I mean, when I say completely opposite of me, this was the kind of people that were supporting me. Have I ever had that in my life before? No. And so was it a little intimidating and scary? It was like, yeah, I don't know where this is going to go. What can this person who has a different financial background than me really tell me about poverty? And once we got past the point of thinking that someone was here to teach me, and getting to the point where I'm also being the teacher and the student as well, that's how you build community, is understanding we learned from each other and it was mutual. And I love connecting with people that look, sound, and act different than me.
As a corporate trainer, one of the things that I have really learned is people learn more when they're teaching themselves. When they're, I mean, not teaching themselves, but teaching other people themselves. Because you have knowledge, you have power, you have an awareness of what actually sparks your enthusiasm,
Mm-hmm.
and you have been defeated before. What brings you down. So
Yeah.
you have all of that to be able to teach someone who hasn't been you before. And someone who might have those rose-colored glasses, oh, the government will provide, and they had something to give you because they know, um, those things that we take for granted sometimes when we've been
Mm-hmm.
in the work world for a long time.
Yes.
The way of getting along with the people at the office, the way of knowing when to speak up and when to just let things slide, the little things, that keep our budgets going and our careers going. And so
Yes.
you were
Definitely.
able to give to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. Now, they didn't set your goals for you, right? In a circles
No.
group,
Yeah.
if I understand, and you can tell me if I'm right, but you come together that once a week, you eat dinner, and
Yeah.
sometimes you have a speaker that talks about a financial thing, right?
Mhm.
And then you get together in your group, and who sets the goals there?
Well, we set the goals. The people that are struggling, I know best of what my needs are, not you. And that was the main thing that I liked about that. That it wasn't, I didn't feel voiceless. I felt heard. And so I got to set my goals, and someone got to come alongside me for support. And that's the biggest thing, to help people to get out of poverty. That's all a lot of people are looking for. I don't need a handout. I don't need you to throw dollars at me, because that's not going to solve the issue. If you're mentally in poverty, then you're in poverty, period. There's financial poverty, there's spiritual poverty, there's all kinds of poverty, intellectual poverty, but that financial poverty is just one aspect of it, which people like to focus on. But there's
Mhm.
also that mental poverty where people have that, I don't see myself getting out of this situation at all. And that's
Yeah.
not true. We always can. You just have to want to try hard enough.
And keep trying, right? You have to
Yes.
keep showing up. So do you remember what the first goal was that you set for yourself?
Oh, I think it was to go back to college,
Oh,
because
really?
the failure of, and I'm not going to say failure, but the trying of going to college, getting that first degree and finding out like, oh, great that you want to be a graphic designer, ma'am, but Dayton don't have too many graphic designer jobs here. I'm like, darn. Okay, so let's try something else. But definitely, I wanted to make sure that I had a better education, and being led down the right path. And of the years of being, so that was 2015 when I joined Circles. And over the years, I did go back to college in
Okay.
2018. I received my second degree. I have a bachelor's in psychology, because I found out that my new passion is actually learning how people work. What's going on up here in the head? Why do we do what we do? I mentally want to be able to get inside the brain and figure things out, because it's giving me more clarity on why my life is where it is and the path I want to go down. And I want to do social work. I want to help other people grow and possibly do therapy. So that's where this new path is taking me.
I am fascinated by psychology.
Me too.
I had an ulterior motive because I know sometimes when we're making changes in our lives, our initial goals are, well, they're colored by the fact that we don't really know, how life is going to be different, and so we make goals based on our past experience, based on what we think will work.
Hmm.
And but you actually made a goal and did it. I mean, that was really something. Even though college hadn't been the answer the first time,
Hmm.
it had obviously taught you some things, and you went back and knocked out a second degree. That's, girl, That is super impressive.
I love it. Not only did I do it the first time, I did the second time, and my son was there both times, and he got to cheer me on and say, "My mom graduated from college." I can hear him in the stands. I'm like, "Don't cry, hold it together." But him being proud of me was a big boost. And my other goal was to move out of low income housing. And last year, made 13 years because I moved in when he was a newborn. 13 years that we lived in low income housing. My baby's 14 this year, and we moved out in February 14th, I believe, Valentine's Day. So I'm not looking back, and I'm not trying to say anything bad or negative about low income housing, but what I will say is it kept me in a rut. As long as I stayed there was that safety net, knowing that, okay, if I lost this job, fine, I don't have to hurry up and find something else. Losing that safety net and all of those benefits that I had actually motivated me to work harder. So I am happy that I moved out of low income housing. I don't want to look back. I'm hopefully I left that apartment available for the next family that needed it. But 13 years of living in low income housing, you can feel stuck and stagnant. And I had to move on and move forward.
I am impressed, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you had the low income housing, because that is, if I look from this side of things at what we do well and what we don't, housing and food are the two things that, at least in Oklahoma, we seem to do fairly well.
Yeah.
I think housing might be a little better. I would like to see, and if anybody's in Oklahoma that can help me work on this, I would like to see us have a better, maybe fewer food banks and more funds towards electric and water and heat, those kinds of things that people need. Public transportation, wouldn't that be nice? Public transportation that actually runs when people need it, which is not just from 8 to 6 each day. People who work those nighttime jobs need that ability. So, there are those things, but you, girl, so you've achieved 2 of those goals. Now you ran into some challenges, right? What happens when you start to make money and you are living on assistance? What happens then?
Oh, man. I talk about this all the time. I public speak about poverty, and I talk about the cliff effect, which is its own monster. As soon as I started making decent enough money, as soon as I was able to get a good job and get out of financial poverty or past that, what we call financial poverty bracket, my rent went from $0 to about $800 a month.
Oh my gosh.
Overnight. And this is all because of the cliff effect. You have a certain bar to not pass if you want to remain receiving any kind of public assistance. And as soon as 1 cent, 1 cent over that's it. No more medical assistance, no more food stamp assistance, definitely no more housing assistance, but they can't literally kick you out of low income housing. They'll just raise the rent as a regular amount. I know people that have houses that don't pay that much a month. And it's not right. It's not to say anything negative about low income housing. This is all a plan. This is how government works. But there's no recovery time for a person that is fresh out of financial poverty. You got a brand new job. You should be like, yes, I feel so proud of myself. Give it about 30 days. And you'd be like, wow, maybe I should not take that job or take that promotion because now I'm about to lose all my help.
So you went from having no job and volunteering at a baseball camp for the summer to working, and all of a sudden, and you're working with someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, right? Because you've been out of work, you had the degree, but you've been out of work. So now you're working probably not a job that paid $100,000 a year, right?
No, nowhere near.
Right? And you suddenly have an $800 a month rent.
Yes.
You have to come up with your own insurance. If your job offered that, was it what, like $300 a month or something, right?
If it even offered it.
If it even offered it. And now no food stamps, so you have to come up with grocery money for
Yes.
you and your kid,
Yes.
which is, I don't know, average a couple $100 a month. I don't know how much people pay when they're supporting a kid. So
A lot.
all of a sudden, you have a job that's supposed to help you get out of this situation, and you're needing to spend more than you make
Yes. And
on
Chrissy, let
the
me tell you,
difference in those
my
benefits.
son is 6'5", about 250 pounds. He's a very giant 14-year-old
Oh my
baby.
goodness.
And let me just put it like this. He eats more than a couple $100 a month.
If anybody's ever raised a teenage boy, you know what she's saying, right?
Yes. So
Oh my
that's
gosh.
just, that they don't count all that in. That's not counted in the final tally. I appreciate all public assistance that has assisted me when it was super hard for me, to where now I can take a break from it if when needed. But man, once you've had it for so long and you lose it, it's like, wow, the whole safety net has been taken out from underneath me overnight. And it's a sink or swim situation.
Yeah.
And it could be very panicky. This is why people fall back in a cycle of poverty, because it's scarier to branch out on your own and leave it than it is to stay.
Yeah. Well, especially when there's that big of a cliff that you can drop off of.
Big cliff.
So one of the biggest focuses of circles in the articles that they publish, and the things that they seem to talk about in your planning sessions, is to help prepare people for the cliff. How did they help you prepare and plan for that eventual cliff? What did you do to protect yourself?
Definitely financial budgeting classes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you don't get offered to you when you're in poverty, at least not enough of. And the reason why a lot of people are in poverty, because they didn't know how to properly budget. You didn't know how to take the little you had and stretch it out to be what it needed to be to cover bills. And that has been a struggle a lot. If any of my friends that I've known that are in poverty, the little bit that they have, maybe they use it to be a little flashy because that's the only time that they can ever do it. And it's like, well, I've never had even this much. So I think that has been a big issue to keeping poverty going, is that feeling that half and half not. But where I feel that circles came around me is they were going, hey, this is how I budgeted. This is how I spent my money. Okay, maybe right now you can't get that brand new car that you want, but this is how, if you put these ducks in a row, you'll eventually get there. So they taught patience. That's what I had to realize. Have a little patience for myself, and eventually that'll happen, and things will happen for me. But also it was just that whole, hey, you got to take care of what you do have, and you got to make sure that where you're putting your money matters. So that's what I had definitely a lot of help with: budgeting.
Well, and you can do that more easily when you have the community alongside you.
Yes.
Because if I can see where I'm going, if I can see that, down the street there's a ice cream truck, right? Then I can run from my house to that ice cream truck. But if I don't see the ice cream truck, but somebody tells me it's there,
Yes.
then maybe I'm going to run a few feet and then I'm going to give up because,
Yes.
I'm not feeling it. If you are surrounded by people who are living in that stuck place, in that crab bucket with you,
Mm-hmm.
and in the crab bucket, some of you guys may not have heard about this, but this is a definitely, it's something I learned about in a Terry Pratchett fantasy novel, but it's a thing. The
Mm-hmm.
crab bucket concept is that people do. They climb over each other. They knock each other back into the bucket every
Yes.
time a crab gets to the top and is about to get to freedom. Somebody pulls him back in, trying to climb up themselves. And
Yes.
when you're in that stuck place, eventually you're just sitting at the bottom of the bucket going, whatever. And that's when we end up in these situations where we have an extra $5 and we spend it because, it's not enough to cover all the bills we have, right? I got an extra $200 because I did this one house cleaning job maybe, but it's not going to cover the car repair and the other thing and the other thing and the other thing that I need. So most of it ends up blown. I spent $100 on something I needed and everything else just goes.
Yeah.
We get that kind of cycle where we're wasting, whether it's our money, the extra spare change we get, or our time. I don't see myself making it to the ice cream truck, and so I whittle, blow the time that I have Facebook and doing things that don't matter. I don't see myself getting out of poverty and having a career and a food truck. Right. So I just sit around watching TV every night. I don't see myself accomplishing, or being where these other people are, because they're, I can't even see them. They're not part of my life. They seem like, aliens. And so I blow the resources God has given me in little bits here and there, what they call dissipation, right? Dissipation is literally spreading what you have in 1,000 directions, like a dandelion seeds, because wishing is all you feel that you have. And wisdom is so much better than wishing. You can tell, I believe that. Wisdom is better than wishing. That having someone alongside you who is talking to you and telling you about the little things that they've done to get where they are, and believing in you and saying, hey, guess what? You can get here too.
Right.
Helps you stay motivated to do those little things with what little you have. It makes what little you have grow exponentially. I was talking to somebody who has a big expense storing things that can't be used right now. And I'm like, if you saved the storage, you just cut it back a little bit, right? You save $50 on the storage. Then after a few months, you could afford to buy all new stuff. You probably would want to. You'd probably want to use it towards something else, but just little shifts in perspective can help us, go a long way.
But that's what people in poverty struggle with, is perspective. It's like, I got to go and buy these flashy clothes. I got to go and do this thing that makes me stand out above the rest. Well, in the end, you've done something that didn't really benefit you. Where is the perspective around what did that buying that gold chain at the time or taking on that new car payment do for you at this moment? And if all it did was bring a little eye candy your way, if all it did was give you the opportunity to be a little flashy, in the end, are you able to eat? Are your bills paid? Do you have the peace of mind that knowing that you have something set up in the bank in case your car breaks down? So that's the perspective that I think is lost when people are going through the cycle of poverty, is really start seeing that ice cream truck, start seeing that gold at the end of the rainbow, and then you'll start to chase it. But until you start to see that that's a possibility for you, and that's where people in poverty, they struggle with seeing the future being bright for them. Until you start seeing it as a possibility for yourself, you're going to stay in the cycle. And then the next generation are going to repeat.
Yeah. And those are days and weeks and years that didn't have to be that way.
No.
That, maybe they were comfortable enough because we knew how to cope with them. They aren't happy, joyful, abundant lives that carry us forward. This whole life is an experiment, right? This whole life existence is a progression. We're kids continuously growing because we are eternal, and God is always going to have something new to show us, something new to build in us, something new to do with us. He built us for companionship, not just because he wanted to decorate the world with people who look like Christy and Monique. He built us because he wanted a Monique, because he wanted a Christy, because he has so much to show us, and he gets really excited at the idea of working together to build life, to do life together. And that requires showing up. That requires prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know myself here, because there are times that my time, I wake up and I'm like, okay, I need to do this and this and this and this and this and this, and pretty soon I'm like, I'm going back to bed. So there are times that I don't stop and prioritize and say, I need to do this, and then I'll look at the rest later. But showing up and spending time with him to go, Lord, what would you like me to do first? What are we going to do today? Show me the people that you see around me. Show me the opportunities that you've put in my life. Help me to restrain myself when I get tempted to spend money on things that honestly couldn't possibly matter, but could be used towards, better goals, right?
Yes.
And when we take the moment, the time to do that, make that connection and prioritize, life is pretty cool.
And the doors that open, once God opens one for you, closes that other, you got to take yourself down that path and follow it. Is it scary? Yes. But what I like to say is that we have to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because if you don't take any chances, doors won't open. Because I took this chance, Christy, of going to the Reds rookies camp, someone told me about Circles, and I went to Circles. Because I went to Circles, I found out that they had AmeriCorps Vista. And I don't know if you're familiar with Volunteers in Service to America. It's like, let's say, the Domestic Peace Corps, basically.
Oh, okay.
That's what AmeriCorps Vista is. So that was another volunteer opportunity. I was like, I'm going to volunteer again. So for 2 years, I'm a AmeriCorps Vista alumni now. I worked for Circles, the community group that took me in 2015. In 2017, I decided to be their AmeriCorps Vista and started working for the group as a volunteer coordinator for 2 years and absolutely loved it. Now we changed our name to Thrive Together, but still the same group with the same core values. And that experience led me to now want to do what I'm doing now, which is helping other people. I public speak about domestic violence. I public speak about poverty. I mentor, motivational speak, advocate for people. But I had to go down that path. I had to trust where God was leading me. If I wouldn't have trusted, if I would have been apprehensive and afraid, I would be still that same young lady living in low-income housing, not doing any better than I am.
And what if you had seen that these people were so different from you? And instead of allowing them to know the things they needed to know to help you, you had shut yourself off and kept to yourself. Where would you be now?
Ooh, curled up in a corner somewhere, like never doing better, never finding my voice, Christy. I think that's the biggest thing. Being AmeriCorps Vista, they allowed me to public speak, and that helped me. That helped me find my voice. Don't you? If you start crying, I'm gonna start crying. I came prepared, okay?
That's why I stopped my mascara.
Look, don't ruin our makeup today now, Miss Christy. Oh man, finding your voice is the most powerful thing. And I was completely voiceless while I was in poverty. I was scared to speak up, to speak out. And what I found out about myself is, hold on, wait a minute. I thought I was a shy kid all this time. I did my Myers-Briggs. Yeah, see, you're laughing. You're like, shy where? Shy where? I mean, when I say shy, and especially when we were growing up in New York, very, I just knew I was an introvert. And when I did my Myers-Briggs and it said extrovert, I said, no, that's a lie completely. But the more and more I public speak and I speak in front of hundreds of people and I don't get that fear in me, I use my voice and I have people at the end after I'm done speaking that says, your words empowered me. Your words changed my life. That is a feeling that I never thought I would have, to have my life, my little life, my insignificant life. Oh, wait, God, you knew I was better than what I thought I was. And I didn't know that. And so being able to speak truth to power, being able to talk to other people, to boost them up, that's the biggest high. That's the thing that keeps me going. That sparked something in me. But I've had people try to shut my voice down, Christy. I've had people tell me to stop, bring it down. The biggest fear is I don't want to ever be seen as the angry Black woman stereotype. But why, as a woman, not even just as a Black woman, but as a woman, when we speak up, why is there always someone trying to shut down our voice? Like we don't matter, like what we say is not important. Just today, we have a woman that is vice president now. Okay,
Yes.
we are where we thought we would not be for a long time. And I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see so many women that are stepping up to power and are showing that we are just important as the men. And I don't want to man bash. I'm just saying, let's, celebrate the sisterhood that we have as women that are trying to empower each other and encourage each other to do better.
That's right. That's right. Let's lift each other up. I love that. And, we do have to, I think communication is something that I may spend my entire life learning about, just like psychology, because there are so many people and they all have different backgrounds and they all have different paradigms.
Yes.
And it's different with every person you talk to. You have to find out how that person will receive the wisdom that you have to share in order to be effective. Otherwise, we're just, what the Bible says, we're just clanging gongs and cymbals if we don't have that love first, if we don't communicate with that love. So we have a few minutes left. And I want to ask about what you're doing now. So you have a couple of things going. I love the food truck idea. I totally do, because that serves as a practical need. And I just think of when you were talking about, when you first said food truck, I thought, oh, yummy, but then when you talked about bringing food, healthy food to the food deserts, I thought of, the old bookmobiles that my friend Jennifer's dad was a bookmobile driver, and he brought a wealth of experience in paperback to the neighborhoods that didn't have libraries. And you're talking about bringing food that nourishes people to places where, the Quickie Mart might be the only, you get convenience packaged food, right?
Yeah.
That's already expensive enough. So you've got that's kind of brewing in you. And then you have just recently started something else. Tell me about what you have just begun this week, actually.
That is my podcast. I just shared my podcast on my Facebook page. So my name that I use for my podcast is Mo Love for You. And it's MOLOVE. The number 4 and the letter U. And I came up with that, I believe it was kind of really at the beginning of this year, I think. And it was just my thing because playing off my name a little bit, but playing on the fact that I'm all about self-care, self-improvement, self-health. And so this podcast is about me being real, being raw, talking about some real situations in my life and the life of other people. A little bit of self-health, self-care, a little bit of advice column, a little bit of everything. But the focus is seeing people become better, empower themselves, and to share my story. I've shared my story for so many years, for so long, and to find that I can help people by just being real, raw, and honest, I will never stop doing that. So I hope that your listeners and viewers are able to come onto my podcast and my Facebook page and really learn a little something, help me to grow too. I love learning new things. So like I say, I'm a teacher and a student.
We learn by doing. And I
Yeah.
love that you've begun, and you began with, well, kind of a sensitive issue, but I can see that already that your focus is the real life mental shift, right? So your first episode was on should you forgive a cheater? And you're like, well, depends on the situation, but don't give up on love
Yeah.
and don't give up on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and let this situation grow you. And so that, to me, that's just a beautiful example of uh, helping people where they are to grow.
Right where they
So
are, because you gotta love with your head and your heart. You gotta be smart.
yeah.
Don't ever let anyone do you wrong and not question where does your heart stand and what is your head telling you. But in this scenario with the cheater, the biggest thing I was thinking about was, the 25-year-old me versus I'm 37 now. The
Mhm.
37-year-old me is different. I have matured so much, and we have a lot of self growth in ourselves. If we think how we would have acted at one time versus how we act now, when I was a child, I played with childish things, and
Sure.
we don't do that anymore. So we have to mature in our mind, mature in our attitude, and mature in our responses to how people treat us, because we can choose to respond negatively or we can
Mhm.
choose to go down a different path.
Yeah. And knowing who you are now, and how far you've come, I know must make that easier
Yeah.
to respond, because you don't have to feel diminished. You don't have to feel afraid and insecure because you've seen what you can do.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
such an encouragement. Monique, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so glad that you shared circles like from a real life experience, and I feel like you've shared so much more with people. I really appreciate you being here. And God bless you with your businesses, your entrepreneurship.
I could use all the help and advice I can get. So if you know any way of look, giving me a boost on, or how to be an entrepreneur, how to get started, what I need to do, help me.
You
I could definitely use the encouragement, support, and help. But thank you so much for having me on and giving me a chance to let my voice be heard.
My pleasure. So I'm just going to tell everybody who's listening, if you are enjoying this interview series and you have something you want to share, then tell me. I help people share their stories. I help Christians become authors, and I can help you share your story in a book, in a podcast, either way. But also, coming in, wow, just 2 weeks, on Facebook Live, we are going to host the Hope to Hope conference. My friend Kim White from My Sexy Business, the entrepreneurial coach genius, she is holding her annual Hope to Hope conference, which is full of amazing stories of people who've been just broken and the beautiful things that have come of it. So watch us. That starts I think the 16th. I'm not looking at my dates, but I will post it in the comments. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time. This is Christy Bridges from One Moment Wiser. Bye.